The story begins with our MC excited to finally achieve what he had dreamed of for so long. He was in a completely unfamiliar environment, experiencing sensations he had never felt before. He finally managed to become part of an isekai, not caring whether it was through body possession or world transfer. His original name is Kim Sun-woo, a young Korean who spent a massive amount of time preparing for this opportunity. To achieve this, he obsessively consumed every book, light novel, webtoon, and game he could get his hands on. In every single work he enjoyed, he made a point to leave his mark in a very specific way. He used to write massive reviews of up to 5,000 characters, picking apart the smallest details of the story. His analyses pointed out flaws in character development and the complete lack of realism in combat scenes. The young man did this every single day without rest, constantly switching targets and remaining extremely meticulous. He memorized every detail of the plot, the world's rules, and the maps of every setting. He knew the relationships between characters by heart, along with the exact locations of hidden relics. As a result, most of his critiques ended up causing the exact same kind of uproar. The authors would give up, the fans would get furious, and he would get banned from communities. But in the end, his determination paid off. After all that time, he finally managed to reincarnate into the body of a character in another world. I wonder if I do the same thing. Can I pull it off too? He begins analyzing his surroundings, trying to figure out where he landed. Upon noticing that his body looks to be around 4 or 5 years old, he decides to test if he has a status window. Hyped up, the boy reaches out his hand and shouts for the system screen to appear right before his eyes. However, absolutely nothing happens, leaving him completely baffled. He quickly realizes this might not be a typical regression story, but he decides not to stress over it. He recalls that many works he critiqued lacked a system altogether, and he remains confident that he will rule this place with no visible powers. He decides the best first step is to invent something to build up a fortune. Now, he starts his first week of possession at just 4 years old. He discovers that the original owner of this tiny body was named Ivan Petrovich. To make matters worse, his new parents are humble peasants who cannot read and do not even know the name of their own country. Trying to innovate, Ivan attempts to craft soap using his modern knowledge, but the experiment flops miserably. On top of getting scolded for messing around with lye, he discovers that soap already existed in that world. 6 weeks pass since he took over the child's body. While walking into town to fulfill a simple errand of getting eggs, a few newspapers catch his attention. He finds it odd to see printed newspapers there, since that implies society is not stuck in the Middle Ages. He starts crossing off several works from his mental candidate list, having no real clue where he actually ended up. 15 weeks pass since the start of his new life over time. He finally manages to learn the name of the country he lives in and who rules over it. Realizing that none of his predictions matched, he rips up the rest of his world list and tosses it straight into the fire. Everything in this place is unknown to him, from the king to the surrounding nations. Now, Ivan's biggest question is not which story he entered, but what genre it actually is. 4 years pass, and he now reaches 8 years of age. Suddenly, the terrifying Demon King reemerges in the world, spreading total chaos everywhere. Facing the danger, Ivan's father asks his son to wait right there and not to worry. The man bids farewell to Ivan at the front door and promises he will make it back home no matter what. Shortly after, he is forcibly taken away by conscription officers to fight on the front lines. From that moment on, Kim Sun-woo's own mind starts losing its way. The MC thought he was going to be a rich noble surrounded by women, but things went downhill fast for him. 2 more years pass, marking the 6th year of his possession. Ivan now helps his mother with farm chores and performs the work quite skillfully. He turns 12 years old, completing his 8th year living in that world. Studying in his free time, Ivan finally manages to master the written script used in that society. 10 years pass since he reincarnated, and he is now 14 years old. Suddenly, somber news arrives for Ivan. He receives official confirmation that his father ended up losing his life in combat. The most bizarre part of it all is that the official casualty document was issued 2 years ago. Completely confused by the situation, Ivan starts suspecting that he might be inside a strategy simulation game. He realizes the world mixes steam engines, firearms, knights, mages, and the Demon King in one giant war. He then looks over at his mother and notices she was crying in total despair upon receiving the news. She cannot bring herself to believe what happened, while Ivan watches her completely heartbroken, not quite knowing what to do. The young man tries to comfort his mother, telling her not to worry, but the very next day he makes a drastic decision to help with the living expenses. He decides to enlist in the military and boards a passenger train. He secures an annual salary of 15 coins and requests that all the money be sent directly to his mother. He does not do this solely out of filial duty, but out of genuine sympathy for that woman who gave everything for him. Furthermore, Ivan feels guilty for occupying the body of her real child, who was her only emotional anchor. Years pass, and now, at 18 years old, Ivan has accumulated 4 years of military service during the battles. He realizes that his new body possesses a talent for fighting far greater than he ever imagined. Thanks to his numerous acts of bravery on the battlefield, he rises from a simple recruit and joins the regular army. However, war is unforgiving, the front line is decimated, and half of the Allied forces end up wiped out in flames. It is precisely during this desperate era that the legendary hero finally appears to save everyone. At that moment, Ivan thinks he finally figured out the world's genre, a classic hero RPG story. The hero's arrival brings hope, but the front line where Ivan is positioned keeps taking brutal hits. The troops continue to be pushed back in a humiliating fashion by giant monsters rising from the earth. Time passes once again, and Ivan turns 28 years old, accumulating 14 years of military service. When the hero's party sets an ambush against the Demon King's generals, the tide of war begins to turn. Because of his consistent achievements, Ivan ends up earning the chance to fight alongside the hero's party. He becomes part of a special division tasked with pacifying reclaimed regions and eliminating remaining threats. To keep things simple, everyone called that dangerous group the Extermination Unit. They sprang into action right after the hero defeated enemy generals, sweeping away the rest of the retreating forces. 2 more years pass, and Ivan now reaches 30 years of age in the middle of this endless conflict. Finally, the hero's party manages to defeat the Demon King, bringing peace to the kingdom amidst everyone's celebration. Ivan decides to simply wait patiently for the story's ending. He stays in high anticipation that his mission is over and he can finally return home. He thought he would be able to escape that terrible world, but now he is already 32 years old. 2 years have passed since the Demon King fell, and not a single sign of ending credits has appeared. Meanwhile, the number of soldiers in his extermination unit has been reduced to just 1/5 of its original size. Ivan continues facing fierce and perilous battles even after the official end of the war. Realizing the higher-ups wanted to get rid of the unit, Ivan is discharged after completing one final assignment. The problem is that this final task was nothing more than a trap set by the military leaders. In hopes that this long epilogue will finally conclude, Ivan turns 34 years old. On top of everything, it has already been 10 years since his dear peasant mother passed away from old age. With no one left in the world, the man decides to return alone to his old hometown. Ivan opens an orphanage near the kingdom's capital and begins taking in children who lost their parents in the war. Even so, time keeps ticking away, and the journey shows no signs of ending. Without any end credits in sight, the children play happily in the courtyard of St. Vasilicia Orphanage. While listening to the shouting outside, Ivan lets out a heavy sigh inside his library. He starts writing in his diary about the immense longing he feels for his old life back on Earth. He writes down a list of Korean foods he wants to devour as soon as he returns. Nearly going out of his mind with craving, 4 years have already passed since the downfall of the Demon King, and he wonders if the ending will only come when the hero passes away from old age. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoes through the wooden hallway of the orphanage. Ivan stops writing immediately and goes on high alert upon sensing someone approaching. His combat instincts kick in as he hears that all too familiar sound. He recognizes the scrape of leather, the scent of gunpowder, and the steady rhythm of a well-trained soldier. Carefully and silently, he grips a hatchet hidden behind his back, prepared for the absolute worst. The office door begins to open slowly, making a tense creak in the air. A smiling soldier walks in with a salute, but Ivan cuts him off and cold-called his name, Dmitri. Ivan points his hatchet and tells the young man he should have knocked on the door. But Dmitri complains that they never bothered with those formalities. The veteran lowers his weapon and states directly that they are only there to handle important business. Dmitri complains that the veteran is impatient and will not even let him sit down before handing over a sealed envelope. He encourages Ivan to read the document right away, explaining that it is a personal letter sent directly by the princess herself. Dmitri jokes about whether the letter contains poison and urges him to open it quickly, claiming it must just be a courtesy message. Ivan grows extremely suspicious at the idea of the princess sending a letter just to check up on him. He knows full well that the feared Elizaveta, known as the Iron and Blood Princess, would never send a letter without a real motive behind it. Dmitri confesses that the political situation in the kingdom is terrible, with the military administration begging daily to pull troops back. To make matters worse, he reveals that Crown Prince Alexander is trying to carve the country into 5 parts to sell it off. While all this crisis unfolds, the current king simply remains seated on the throne without uttering a single word. Dmitri then mentions the prestigious international university, the famous academy of the Allied Kingdoms that was founded during the war. The soldier asks if Ivan has any idea who the new students and professors entering St. Yansk University this year are. He reveals that the first standout student is Isabel, the talented daughter of the great hero Maximilian II. On the list of newcomers is Oscar, the young son of the respected knight Gilles de Rice. Next comes Elfie Hera, the daughter of the powerful archmage Bulgreen, who also enrolled in the institution. Joining them are Esidisi, daughter of the berserker Einar, and Lucia, the young disciple of the skilled rogue Enrique. In other words, the children of all the heroes who defeated the Demon King are there, with the former saint of the party taking over as department head. Since the school places no age limit, promising youth from all over the world prepared early on to secure a spot, Dmitri warns that, given the importance of these young heroes, if even a single one ends up severely injured or eliminated inside, the entire country will be completely ruined, which makes Ivan immediately ask what he needs to do. The soldier explains that the mission is to protect all the kids over the next 3 years, ensuring not a single one gets so much as a scratch. Internally, Ivan boils with frustration, asking himself why the conclusion of a hero's story has to be so complicated. He curses the fake idea of a happy ending, now having to deal with international tensions, dirty politics, and an academy that popped out of nowhere. Suddenly, a light bulb goes off in Ivan's mind as he analyzes all the facts presented by Dmitri. He takes a dramatic pause and starts connecting the dots, going into complete shock at the conclusion he just reached. He slams both hands onto the desk with force. Startling Dmitri with his sudden reaction, Ivan lets out an irritated curse while trying to process the truth behind that world. He finally realizes the terrifying reality that this story was actually a web novel set in a school environment all along. A startled Dmitri asks if the veteran is feeling all right, and Ivan responds with heavy irony about his current mental state. He grows indignant upon realizing that the 30 years of brutal war he fought through were merely the prologue to the main story. Gritting his teeth in anger, Ivan clenches his fist so hard that he ends up cracking the wooden desk. He concludes that all he has to do is ensure these kids graduate safely so he can finally see the end credits and head back home. With eyes shining with determination, he accepts the mission and promises himself that Kim Sun-woo will finally return to Earth. He begins reading the princess's letter, where she calls him by his nickname Vanka and says she has been hearing good news about him. She asks if he still remembers when they tended the garden together, subtly complaining that he left without ever looking back. Elizaveta writes that winter is approaching once again, and that this one will be much colder and quieter than the previous ones. In the letter's illustration, a beautiful, delicate hand is shown softly touching the leaves of a garden plant. The princess refers to Ivan as her most trusted lumberjack in the entire kingdom. She promises to pay 3 times over for any favor he asks, and says that if the reward falls short, she will pay with their friendship. The young woman continues writing that if even then the debt remains unpaid, she is willing to pay with the memories they share. Elizaveta emphasizes that the kingdom still needs Ivan's devotion, exactly as it always did in the past, and will continue to need. She bids farewell affectionately, and Ivan, upon finishing the letter, decides to distill all that poetic fluff into practical terms. The summary of the mission is straightforward. Guarantee that none of the former heroes' kids perish or get hurt during their 3 years at the academy. Thinking he is in a slice-of-life school web novel, he gets hyped at the chance of going home. After enduring just 3 more years, Ivan asks who the first student arriving will be, and Dmitri replies that it will be the daughter of the berserker Einar. Sent by the king of Drone. Hearing Einar's name, Ivan instantly feels a chill run down his spine as memories of the past rush back. Although the man is now known as the Great King of Drone, Ivan still vividly remembers how he acted during their time in the hero's party. He recalls Einar as a completely unhinged warrior who would laugh maniacally while swinging his massive axe, and the very first person on her way to the prestigious military academy is the daughter of that total lunatic Einar. Shouts proudly that his daughter will conquer absolutely everything, inheriting the blood of the great conqueror. The common folk start gossiping that the heiress is heading to the university just to study orchestral music, which sparks chuckles. Annoyed by the warrior's jokes, Esidisi, the eldest daughter of the berserker Einar, yells out asking what on earth is wrong with music. She enters the music department at St. Yansk University, determined to prove to everyone that she will be a grand success. The Order of Knights throws her a grand send-off, but just 2 days later, the train carrying her suffers an accident. The train derails violently on the tracks. Amidst a massive explosion of fire, Ivan is taken aback upon receiving news of the train incident and asks Dmitri if he is absolutely certain about it. The veteran quickly grasps the reason behind it all, knowing that this type of event is standard fare in a school trope. He recalls that in standard hero stories, the MC defeats the Demon King alongside his companions. It is also quite common for one of the enemy generals to switch sides to help out the hero's party. In the end, peace returns to the world in a peaceful manner, with all these events being well-known cliché formulas. But now Ivan tries to recall the document he burned 30 years ago. He tries to dredge up from memory the rules and tropes written on the paper he destroyed in the past to understand the current scenario. Ivan knows that a terrorist attack on the incoming train at Gorvich Station is the textbook starter event for this genre. This chaotic opening is part of the basic common sense of any story set in an academy, with time ticking down to 9 in the morning. The train carrying Princess Esadisi is getting very close to arriving at the location. He calculates that if someone actually wanted to target the princess, the best spot would be right at that border station. Crossing the border would shift the blame onto the kingdom, and the following stretch is a heavily guarded military sector, lacking solid evidence. Ivan did not request reinforcements, but observing the site, he finds the enemy's security measure laughably amateurish. The veteran enters the station lobby in disguise and begins walking calmly while analyzing the people present. He spots a man pretending to read the schedule board, yet who let 3 trains pass without boarding any of them. The other guy selling vegetables is even more absurd, considering nobody buys cabbage there, and he is smoking right next to the produce. Ivan decides to move and quietly approaches one of the suspects sitting with his back turned on a wooden bench. The man notices the sudden approach and turns his head startled, not understanding what is going on. Without hesitation, Ivan draws his weapon swiftly and points it straight at the suspect's head. The man begins trembling in terror and stammers, asking what the veteran thinks he is doing. Coldly and relentlessly, Ivan tells the suspect to shut his mouth and avoid making any sudden moves. Around them, the other disguised accomplices notice the action, draw their weapons, and yell for Ivan not to move. Ivan finds it pathetic that they noticed him, as his weapon should have been concealed, and decides to run a quick test before acting. He points the weapon at the hostage's head and sharply asks who he is really working for. The man plays dumb and stammers, trying to buy time in the face of the threat. Wasting no time on lies, Ivan pulls the trigger and takes out the suspect on the spot with a clean shot. The body hits the floor and Ivan immediately turns around to fire toward the other disguised enemies. He concludes they are not kingdom operatives, as true professionals would have identified themselves instead of questioning his authority. Panicked by the swift elimination of their partner, the other terrorists start screaming frantically to shoot the veteran down. Ivan moves nimbly, dodging incoming fire, noting how slow and amateurish those shooters are. The thugs fire multiple times toward Ivan, but he effortlessly dodges every single round. In the blink of an eye, he closes the distance on the shooters and uses his hatchet to land fast, precise strikes. He moves like a phantom through the station lobby, disarming and striking the enemies one by one. Ivan lands devastating blows that drop the thugs to the floor without giving them a chance to react. The veteran knows full well that those weak henchmen have never faced a true warrior in their entire lives. The fake vegetable vendor lies squirming on the floor, holding his severed arm. Crying out from the severe injury, Ivan looks down on him and cold warns that if he does not stop the bleeding right away, he will perish in under 3 minutes. Stained with crimson, the veteran intimidatingly demands to know where the rest of the strike group is located. The man weeps in terror and begs for help, revealing that there are 15 more armed men stationed near the tracks. He mentions that their leader is a real monster, and Ivan deduces that the trio at the station was merely a scout squad. The thug confirms in desperation and begs to be saved in exchange for info, but Ivan wants to know if they knew who was on the train. The man swears they only knew it was a regular cargo train carrying gold or goods from Drone. He asks tearfully if the veteran will spare his life. Now that he answered everything truthfully, Ivan replies coldly that he let one lie slip through, plunging the man into absolute panic before making his move. Ivan delivers the final hatchet strike to the captive, stating coldly that his lie was claiming he would be useful. He checks the Gorvich station clock and sees that it is now exactly 9:53 in the morning. As an elite operative from the extermination unit, Ivan takes only 5 minutes to make the bodies disappear and scrub away all the mess. After finishing cleaning up the combat scene, the clock reads 9:58, leaving just 2 minutes before the train arrives. The veteran calmly adjusts his coat, knowing that time is more than enough to get ready. Far away, in a luxurious imperial palace, Princess Elizaveta asks her subordinate about Ivan's current status. The officer reports that he suspects an imminent attack on the train, having been incredibly specific about the date and location. The princess asks if Ivan happened to have a secret informant, but the officer denies it, saying there were no signs of that. Over the past years, Elizaveta starts laughing mysteriously, leaving the officer confused as he asks if something is wrong with her reaction. She orders that every step and mundane action Ivan takes from now on be recorded and brought directly to her. Elizaveta wants to personally review everything at any moment, displaying the imposing stance that earned her the moniker Iron Princess. She smiles, thinking that he is still the same as 4 years ago, acting relentlessly, even when relying on pure suspicion. The princess feels a strong conviction in his actions, while the scene cuts back to the train speeding across the snowy mountains. As he runs through the snow, Ivan is absolute certain about how things will play out from this moment forward. He knows full well how the basic tropes and script of any school story function. An initial attack on a transport train is never capable of harming the protagonist or the main cast. This crash event, right before classes start, serves purely as a basic tutorial for the academy students. The tutorial exists solely for the characters to adapt to danger, while the terrorists on the cliff prepare to trigger the explosives. One of the enemies hits the dynamite detonator button without a second thought. Ivan reveals that he actually never had the slightest intention of preventing the train derailment in the first place. Princess Esidisi screams in terror inside the carriage, while Ivan runs, knowing that the tutorial must be solved by the students themselves. Ivan's plan in letting the attack happen is simple. Identify which criminal syndicate is responsible for blowing up the train. That way, he can hunt down and eliminate every single member of that organization covertly once he is inside the academy. His goal is to operate from the shadows, avoiding open conflict and focusing strictly on rear intelligence work. Quietly exterminating any future threat before it grows is his core motto. After all, that was always the ruthless doctrine utilized by the extermination unit during the war. In the deep snow, the wrecked train burns intensely following the massive dynamite detonation along the rail line. The terrorists begin celebrating the success of their ambush near the wreckage, cheering joyfully that they are rich now. The leader orders the royal seal to be erased from the loot so they can sell everything on the black market, telling his henchmen to clear the area fast. Suddenly, the deafening sound of a gunshot echoes through the snowy valley, catching one of the men completely off guard. One of the terrorists is struck directly in the head by the shot and drops lifeless instantly in front of his comrades. To Ivan, freezing or hesitating upon hearing the sound of gunfire is a weakness only soft warriors possess. The group leader screams in a rage, wanting to know who the punk that fired was, but their frightened reaction reveals something important to Ivan. He realizes that none of those mercenaries possess the advanced ability to sense enemy bullet trajectories. Ivan walks calmly toward the group through the snow, pointing his firearm and asking directly who their leader is. In a panic at the intimidating presence of the intruder, the bandit chief orders everyone to open fire on him immediately. Ivan prepares to dodge the incoming rounds, activating his combat perception technique. He activates fireline perception, allowing him to visually track the exact trajectory of every projectile fired at him in his mind. For high-level warriors, standard firearms do not work because they can sense the killing intent radiating from the opponent. This murder intent becomes embedded both in the weapon's trigger and in the bullet itself as it travels through the air. In close-quarters combat, masking killing intent using mana is basic knowledge, but doing so with fast-moving projectiles is practically impossible. For that reason, nobody in the hero's party used handguns. But Ivan decides to do things differently. As an exception to the general rule, absolutely every agent in the extermination unit carries a sidearm into combat. They use firearms to gauge the skill level and reaction time of their opponents at the start of a battle, and naturally, they use them to swiftly dispatch weaker adversaries without wasting physical energy. The mercenary chief charges forward enraged, wielding his daggers and shouting insults at the MC. He tries to strike Ivan while asking who sent him and where such a dangerous warrior came from. The bandit leader is blindsided by the veteran's incredible speed and takes a direct hit from Ivan's counterattack. Ivan effortlessly blocks the opponent's advance and lands a devastating blow using his superior physical strength. With a swift movement, the veteran slams the enemy leader into the frozen ground with extreme violence, creating a crater in the snow. The mercenary leader crawls with difficulty in the snow, while Ivan slowly approaches him with steady steps. The man screams that he burned Ivan's face into his memory, but the veteran merely asks back if he is truly good at remembering faces. Ivan draws his hatchet and calmly states that he considers that good memory a stroke of luck for what comes next. The mercenary enters complete panic as he notices the veteran's cold gaze, mentally tagging him as the boss of this tutorial. Knowing that the fate of this boss is to be defeated by the MC in the future, Ivan does not plan to eliminate him, but he has other ideas. He orders the man to answer his questions right away, warning that he knows 1,000 ways to interrogate without damaging internal organs. In a flashback from 2 months ago in the Palace of Drone, Princess Ezedisi yells angrily, forbidding her father from following her. She threatens to disown him on the spot if she notices any of his guards or spies tailing her to the academy. The young woman turns her back and walks away with her violin, leaving King Einar completely crushed and distraught over his daughter's departure. However, the berserker king soon gets a stroke of genius. As long as his daughter does not catch him tailing her, everything will be fine to put his plan into motion. He immediately summons all his elite warriors for an emergency briefing. Einar shouts to the group, asking who among them could protect his beloved daughter without ever being spotted by her. All the muscular warriors raise their fists and cheer enthusiastically, accepting the mission to guard the princess in the past. These men were bloodthirsty maniacs, but now they are considered battle brothers loyal to King Einar. The king ponders that his daughter knows every single one of their faces, meaning she would easily recognize them even in disguise. He then poses a new question, wanting to know which warrior would be capable of chasing the train on foot. Once again, the warriors proudly volunteer, ready to prove their absolute loyalty to the king without demanding any reward in the kingdom of Drone. These elite warriors and personal bodyguards are known by the title of Housecarls. Einar is overjoyed and says that now they only need to pick one of them to pass the entrance exam and enter the academy alongside her. The king asks for a show of hands for whoever considers themselves smart enough to pass the school's written exams. Hearing about a written test, all the warriors break into a cold sweat and whisper that they would rather face battle than take a pen test. Suddenly, a muscular arm rises courageously at the back of the royal hall of Droan. It belongs to Mord Eriksson, a loyal housecarl who steps up to take the tough exam on behalf of his king. Einar gets extremely moved by his brother's action, who tries to reassure him by saying the theoretical test cannot be that hard. The king celebrates enthusiastically and declares that from that moment on, Mord is officially enrolled in the physical education department. The warrior shouts back, guaranteeing he will fulfill the mission and protect the princess with his very life. 2 months later, the infiltration plan of warrior Mord into the military academy finally starts paying off. Surprisingly enough, he manages to pass the entrance exams and secures his official spot in the physical education track. Obviously, he almost failed the theoretical exam, messing up even the simplest math problems on the test sheet. The academy examiners are left horrified and shocked as they read the absurd answers he wrote down on the test. But his passing was only made possible because he shattered every historical record in the practical physical evaluation, cutting back to the present on a freezing January day along the border railway tracks. The warrior Mord Eriksson runs non-stop alongside the tracks, having chased the train on foot for 2 whole days without sleep or rest. He screams frantically for his niece, furious at the thought that some filthy scoundrel might have dared lay a finger on her after the derailment. Inside the destroyed, overturned carriage from the heavy impact of the blast, young Ezedisi slowly starts regaining consciousness. She groans from pain all over her body and tries to make sense of what actually caused the train to go off the rails like that. Looking out through the shattered window, she is horrified to spot several armed men surrounding the train. Ezedisi panics, regretting having threatened to disown any guard who attempted to accompany her on this trip. Suddenly, she notices her instrument case landed near the carriage debris. Relieved, the young woman hugs her beloved violin, beyond happy to see that the musical instrument suffered no damage in the crash. But her moment of relief is short-lived as a loud noise comes from the passenger carriage door. The metal door is kicked violently by the intruders, making the princess shriek in fright at the terrifying sound. Trembling in fear, the girl huddles in the corner, clutching her violin tightly while trying to hide. One of the terrorists begins laughing sadistically as he notices the defenseless girl in the wrecked carriage. Several mercenaries enter the carriage with wicked glares, mocking the girl and remarking that they found easy prey in there. Meanwhile, near the tracks, Ivan continues his relentless interrogation of the scout leader, who begs frantically for an end. The veteran says coldly that the man is definitely not passing away just yet. While the mercenary continues screaming in pain on the ground, Ivan calmly asks him to stop saying such scary things and begins preparing a vial of healing potion. The man lets out an agonizing shriek as Ivan pours the glowing green liquid directly onto his open wounds. The mercenary weeps and begs Ivan to stop, realizing the healing potion is being used solely to keep him alive for more agony. The man screams in pain as the green liquid burns his skin, bringing up the question of what frontline soldiers hate most: Besides terrible rations and incompetent officers, a soldier's worst nightmare in combat is the dreadful healing potion. Nobody understands that pain better than Ivan himself, who recalls the desperation of the mercenary begging them to just chop off his arm once and for all. In the military hospital, nurses asked him not to joke about that. Reminding him that his body was considered the nation's greatest treasure, Ivan would shout in outrage from his gurney, asking in full fury what kind of person would treat a national treasure in such a painful manner. He remembers how in his youth, nurses told him to tough out another bottle of medicine, not caring whether it hurt or not. That cursed medicine concentrated all the pain of a slow recovery into a few seconds, being identical to the famous albuthil back in Korea. After feeling the medicine's effect firsthand, Ivan found a new application for it as an interrogation tool, receiving praise from his unit squad mates. The method consisted of treating the wound with the potion, interrogating again and healing again, drawing desperate cries and transforming medicine into something horrific. Crying endlessly, the prisoner swears he knows nothing else and begs for the end, proving the potion was the ultimate truth serum. Ivan says he needs to stay alive, as he is likely just the tutorial boss of the story and there is no real reason to end him. He carries the man carefully toward the train tracks, noticing he is just a weak henchman who does not even know who planned the attack. The veteran starts suspecting that the masterminds cast some kind of perception-blocking spell on the henchmen's minds. Suddenly, Ivan's combat instincts flare up as he feels a lethal danger rapidly approaching through the air. He tries to calculate where the enemies are aiming, but realizes the target is not just his eyes. In fact, the massive attack is heading toward his entire face, forcing the veteran to react as fast as humanly possible. A huge boulder is hurled at him, smashing into the ground with extreme violence and triggering a massive dust explosion. He realizes immediately that it would make zero sense to try using his handgun against a physical strike of that scale. Ivan deduces the opponent is far stronger than he anticipated, given the monstrous power required to throw a rock that size. The impact of the huge rock destroys the tracks and kicks up a dense curtain of smoke and dust across the whole area. The veteran stands motionless in the thick haze, waiting for the dust to settle to spot where the attack originated. He concludes the mysterious opponent is also a formidable warrior, capable of reading attack trajectories with precision. With eyes glowing intensely through the smoke, Ivan cold orders the hidden enemy to step out and show himself. Heavy, firm footsteps echo across the dirt ground, revealing the silhouette of a man shrouded in a red aura of mana. Mord Eriksson leaps out gripping his giant axes, praising Ivan's skill, but keeping an aggressive combat stance. The warrior roars furiously that it was absolute stupidity for Ivan to dare lay hands on his beloved niece, regardless of his skill. Seeing the new opponent's strength, Ivan realizes he made a misjudgment about who the true tutorial boss of the academy was. The veteran firmly wields his two combat hatchets, gearing up for the first real clash of his new journey. He drops into a combat stance, hoping that elite warrior knows something useful, since he actually seems like the real leader. Mord charges furiously, swinging his axe downward in a powerful strike. Ivan defends against the devastating attack, generating a massive impact that shatters the ground around them. Ivan locks his sharp gaze on the opponent and finds that fighting style very strange. Mord quickly notices the absurd strength of his opponent and sees that he is way too strong. Ivan masterfully spins his hatchet in the air, setting up his next combat move. Ivan clashes his weapons against Mord's axe, wondering if he was wrong to think this was just a tutorial. He finds it bizarre for someone with such immense skill to be involved in a simple robbery like that. The veteran starts suspecting that maybe someone else is pulling all the strings from behind the curtain. A colossal clash of forces takes place between the two warriors in the middle of that intense duel. Ivan shouts out in concern upon realizing Princess Esidisi, one of the protagonists, is in danger. Mord screams frantically for his dear niece Isi, wanting to protect her no matter the cost. Both rush forward with everything they have in combat, determined to save the girl endangered on the train. A loud explosion rocks the train cars, startling everyone inside at that moment. Esidisi ends up cornered by the criminals and frantically begs them to stop. One of the thugs laughs mockingly, saying he thought she was just an ordinary survivor. The criminal is struck with extreme violence in the face by a completely unexpected violin swing. Esidisi screams an apology to her violin Kang Kang, while hitting the thug with every ounce of strength she has. She starts brutally wailing on all the criminals inside the carriage using nothing but her instrument. The other henchmen freeze completely, terrified as they watch that unbelievable sight, holding her broken violin. Esidisi trembles in pure rage and channels her fury toward the remaining criminals. Esidisi cries in rage and curses the thugs for breaking her beloved 2-year-old violin. Although she looks like her mother, her rage comes straight from her father, the legendary destroyer Einar. She laments tearfully, stating that her beloved violin Kang Kang was truly a wonderful instrument. In a panic, one of the criminals screams frantically for the others to get out of there as fast as possible. Esadisi spins what remains of her violin in the air, fully set on taking down every single intruder. She vows vengeance for her instrument, marking the birth of the strongest music student on Earth. One of the thugs is sent flying outside screaming for help, leaving Ivan quite surprised by the scene. Another criminal lands headfirst on the ground outside the train, completely wrecked by the girl. The thugs flee in terror, screaming that she lost her mind, making Ivan and Mord pause their fight in total confusion. Ivan and Mord frantically ask if the young redhead named Esadisi is all right, and out of harm's way, Ivan runs while wondering if the man he healed earlier with the potion was not the kidnapper after all. The cliché comes to mind that in train robbery arcs in school stories, a sidekick always shows up to save the day. Mord suspects whether Ivan was that sidekick and asks if he was not working with the criminals earlier. Ivan does not get the suspicion, but Mord reminds him that he saw him pouring a healing potion on one of the thugs. Ivan recalls that using the painful potion to heal and interrogate is a classic military interrogation method. Ivan explains he only wanted to extract information, and Mord accepts the excuse with a laugh, saying he should have mentioned it sooner. Suddenly, Mord senses a strange presence approaching and lets out a surprised murmur. Esadisi emerges from the dust with eyes glowing intensely, making Mord shout her name in relief. He runs joyfully over to see that she is okay, while the young girl looks a bit confused to see her uncle there. Ivan watches the girl in silence, remembering he last saw her 7 years ago. Back then, she was just a little kid who ran happily to hug her uncle. Since she is safe and has a strong guardian at her side, Ivan knows she will manage to reach the academy. The veteran knows it would be a massive headache if his true identity were exposed right at that moment. Esadisi notices the empty space and asks if there was no one else there, but Ivan had already decided to fall back. Mord stays silent, looking at the spot where the mysterious warrior was standing just moments before. He reflects on Ivan's fighting style, noticing it was a carbon copy of the Krasnov Special Forces. Mord also found the axe technique familiar, strongly echoing the methods used by his brother Einar. Piecing all the clues together, he concludes there is only one man capable of that. Hero candidate Ivan Petrovich Mord asks if she remembers someone named Ivan, and she responds excitedly that she definitely remembers him. She describes him as a very kind and nice person, while the two continue walking along the tracks together. Mord recalls hearing that Ivan had passed away 2 years ago, and complains that it is tough to recognize him with all that beard. Ivan lets out a long, weary sigh as he quietly observes the horizon. He reflects alone that it was an extremely exhausting day for such a small payoff. A report confirms that King Einar's eldest daughter arrived safely, and the mission was successfully completed. Day breaks calmly over the beautiful St. Vasilisa orphanage. With its white buildings under a clear sky, Ivan reads the confirmation letter and whispers to himself that everything went smoothly. He analyzes the upcoming arrival of 2 other heroes' children and concludes he does not need to worry due to the short distance. The veteran knows that Archmage Baelgreen's daughter will arrive by airship, while Lucia, Enrique's disciple, is already in the capital. He feels relieved at not having to bump into her and wonders if the tutorial will finally wrap up after stopping 2 more train incidents. Ivan bites the end of his pen and begins planning what his next move should be from here on out. On paper, he writes down a list of dishes he wants to eat once he returns to Earth, starting with kimchi stew. But he quickly changes his mind, crosses out the first option, and writes tteokbokki with absolute enthusiasm. He envisions the dish very simple and traditional, the classic kind sold at school street carts. Sighing from homesickness, Ivan is interrupted by the memory of Priscilla, accusing him of wanting to abandon them again. Sensing a sudden movement right behind him, he turns around startled to see who is there. Priscilla appears smiling at the window and reveals she has been there since he started muttering about food. Intrigued, the director asks how she managed to climb up there, and she hops right into the office. She mentions she studies hard in the graduating class, but Ivan reminds her they are on the 3rd floor and asks if climbing is part of the lessons. She celebrates her victory in the orphanage game, while Ivan simply asks her to use the hallway next time for safety. This traditional and super popular game among the orphanage kids works in a very specific way. The grand challenge consists of trying to sneak up on the feared director without him sensing their presence. Everyone tried everything to catch him off guard, knowing how immensely skilled Director Ivan was. Even without looking, the veteran could feel any incoming approach from behind. He was capable of snatching objects thrown at him from behind without exerting the slightest effort. Furthermore, Ivan could always find any hidden child on his very first attempt. But what drew everyone's attention the most was his imposing posture and mysterious aura. With complete composure, he would gently lift the little ones out of their hiding spots with ease and care. Despite his intimidating looks, Ivan was very gentle and let the kids play by climbing on his shoulders. The director thinks that if the little ones manage to fool his sharp senses during that fun game, he will be certain that they can manage just fine on their own in the real world when they leave the orphanage until the day to leave arrives in 2 weeks. Ivan decides to simply enjoy his sweet, peaceful freedom. At least, that was exactly what the veteran believed was going to happen in the coming days. But everything changes when Priscilla is held hostage by thugs and warns them that their director will wipe out all the captors. One of the captors asks in annoyance where a simple orphanage girl learned to suppress her presence so well when they ask the man's name. Priscilla responds with immense pride that he is named Ivan Petrovich. The thugs look at each other quite startled and stammer as they repeat the war veteran's legendary name. Right after, the henchmen burst out laughing and mockingly say that of course they have heard of him. He chuckles, explaining that Ivan is the most common name in Krasilov and Petrovich is the most generic last name there. The henchman suddenly stops laughing as a chill runs down his spine. Hearing a cold voice ask them to hold on a second, a long-haired woman steps out of the shadows and menacingly asks who they were talking about. Completely intimidated by the strong presence of the newcomer, Priscilla stammers that she meant the director. Shrouded in terrifying red mana, the woman repeats Ivan's name in a deep, mysterious tone. Back at the orphanage, Ivan holds the clothes that belong to the girl and repeats his own name thoughtfully. The nuns go into a frenzy, reporting that Priscilla was taken, but the director calmly says he remembers her well. He focuses his eyes on the mark left on her garments, instantly recognizing the symbol of a very wicked person. Knowing she is the last person he wanted to see in his life, Ivan accepts that he will need to adjust his urgent plans. He knows that Mark represents a direct summons from his former master from many years ago. The veteran recalls that the terrifying extermination unit where he served in the past was created by her. The old master smirks, remembering that audacious girl had said she was going to retire for good. However, the feared Dark Blade. Enrique suspects her former pupil was merely building a secret group in the shadows. Ivan walks through the underground canals of southern Prigenzhskaya, knowing Enrique's dungeon is located somewhere there. It took him under 3 hours to pinpoint the hideout, though he admits it is his first time seeing the place in person. He recalls that at the center of the city's main garden stood major monuments, including the statue of the nameless hero. However, shortly after the end of the war against the Demon King, the statue of the nameless hero simply vanished without a trace. To the authorities, the disappearance of the great statue did not seem to matter much, as a wooden notice was placed in its spot. The sign bore a message from Enrique, stating that mourning the loss of her comrades was her right as part of the hero's party. Ivan deduces that Enrique stole the statue because she felt they were blades too sharp to live in times of peace. The veteran focuses his attention on the inscriptions carved into the stone tablet accompanying the hidden statue there. The message read that their glory would be immortal, even if forgotten, signed by Princess Elizaveta and Enrique Ivan. Closes his eyes for a brief moment and bows silently in deep respect. He repeats in his mind that no one should mourn those who departed first from that painful journey. The veteran knows full well that soon enough, he himself will be marching alongside those same ranks as his allies. A heavy stone door slowly begins to open before him, revealing the path forward. The veteran stands observing the grand statue before stepping into the hideout's main hall. Sensing a familiar presence nearby, Ivan goes on alert and walks confidently toward the room. Stepping into the lavish underground hall, he comes across a set table and a cup of tea that is still hot. Ivan stares at the person seated on the couch and realizes she still remembers him perfectly. The woman asks if this is truly the first time they are looking each other in the eye after 7 long years. Enrique, the legendary rogue of the hero's party, smiles provocatively and calls the veteran Little Ivan. She is a powerful vampire who betrayed her creator a century ago, drank his blood, and lives making assassination contracts. Enrique is also known as the Dark Blade, who masterminded the creation of the terrible and ruthless extermination unit. Dubbed the traitor, the vampire smiles with folded arms and points out that he has not taken a single sip of his coffee. She asks if he fears poison, but Ivan replies he does not care if it gets cold, since he comes from a country where they drink iced coffee. Getting straight to the point, Ivan demands to know where Priscilla is, and she finds his usual rush amusing. Enrique calmly asks him not to harbor so much hostility and resentment against her during this reunion. She flashes a sharp smile showing her vampiric fangs and says that aggressive attitude makes him look reckless. Sensing a sudden threat in the air, Ivan reacts quickly and places his hand on the hilt of his secret weapon. She locks her reddish eyes on him and reminds him that she taught him, showing hostility is a weakness of prey. The master guarantees Priscilla is completely safe for now, since she has not bitten her to turn her yet. Ivan feels an enormous killer intent suffocating the air as red snake-shaped mana wraps around him. Cornered by the overwhelming pressure of his master, Ivan listens as the vampire demands he answer her questions. With several massive snakes floating around him, Enrique wants to know what he is actually plotting. With a furious look, she demands to know Ivan's plan behind that strange decision to gather orphans. Initially, the vampire thought Ivan's desire to care for kids after retiring was just something cute. But seeing young orphans using flawless military techniques against her, Enrique thinks Ivan opened an assassin academy. Faced with all these suspicions, the vampire concludes that the hero's action is a clear declaration of war. She stares at him with absolute seriousness, expecting an honest explanation regarding his real intentions. Enrique confesses with a pouting face that she feels quite offended and hurt by his lack of trust. She also complains about his hideous beard, sarcastically asking if he really thought that would serve as a disguise. Ivan gets confused, as he came with no intent to fight, but feels she is ready to strike him down if he makes a move. He wonders how he should start explaining himself to Enrique to calm his former mentor's temper. Ivan recalls that despite the superficial post-war peace, the kingdom of Krasilov ended up divided by a power struggle. On one side stood the crown prince seeking external wars, and on the other Princess Elizaveta trying to maintain peace to avert war. The princess dispatched covert agents who faked their passings to protect future leaders at the academy. Ivan is precisely one of those undercover agents, which makes Enrique's question about a conspiracy completely baseless. The hero suspects Enrique's motives for wanting to know details about his mission, assigned directly by Princess Elizaveta. The veteran begins to wonder if his master happened to align herself with the dangerous crown prince. Massive tension fills the table while Ivan desperately tries to figure out what is going through her mind. He attempts to defuse the situation by asking about the disciple she is raising, who should soon enter the university. With a mockingly scary smile, Enrique merely murmurs in a mocking tone regarding the hero's comment. Ivan says his client took an interest in her and that it would be a major loss for the nation if something bad happened. He explains he was asked to look after her disciple, a job assigned by Elizaveta, hoping Enrique catches the drift. From Enrique's perspective, Ivan's words sound like a veiled threat that he is targeting her disciple. While Ivan steps back, thinking she understood, Enrique slams the table furious, thinking he wants to eliminate her disciple. Completely unhinged, the vampire yells out loud for Lucia to enter the room immediately. The door opens and young Lucia responds in a cheerful and helpful manner to her master's call. Enrique orders the young girl to introduce herself, and Lucia bows politely, saying she has heard a lot about him. Surprised to see she is human, Ivan asks if the girl truly knows the real race of her own master. With a big smile on her face, Lucia answers without hesitation that her master is definitely a human being. She says that despite the strange diet, her master protects her, and that one's true race is defined by the humanity within them. Faced with such a profound response filled with conviction, Ivan merely lets out a surprised hum of understanding. He finds that open mindset very rare, especially in a kingdom that turned hostile toward non-humans after the war. Enrique says proudly that Lucia is a far better person than them and a precious gift she gained in her life, wrapped in a terrifying aura. The vampire seriously states that because of this, she has no intention of ending Ivan. Ivan takes a deep breath upon hearing that. Realizing things have finally started to settle down between them, Ivan says that if she is still on the royal family's side, he wants to know where his master's loyalty truly lies. He asks what price Alexander offered her to secure her alliance in that dangerous power struggle. Completely confused, Enrique fires back asking if it was not Ivan himself who decided to team up with Prince Alexander. Ivan is taken aback and answers in full honesty that he has never even met the man in person. An awkward and extremely heavy silence fills the entire parlor after that mutual revelation. They continue staring at each other motionless in total silence. While Lucia just watches without understanding a thing, Enrique collapses onto the couch exhausted and complains that talking to Ivan is always draining due to his complete lack of eloquence. Lucia cheerfully remarks that she thinks the two make a great pair, making Enrique scream in irritation at the absurdity. Ivan sighs wearisomely and thinks that all that tension almost justifies requesting overtime pay from the princess. But at the end of the day, what matters to him is that the nightmare kidnapping issue was resolved with total success. He knows that even if the tutorial progresses, Lucia will be safe because Enrique will do everything to guard her personally. Lucia praises her master's killer aura, while Enrique simply rests on the couch trying to forget the earlier stress. Seeing the almost familial relationship between the two, Ivan concludes that the meeting between guardian and tutor ended very safely. Enrique asks why he taught ambushes to the orphans, but he swears they learned on their own to find employment. Later, Ivan walks back home alongside Priscilla down a long road far away from their orphanage. He begins to wonder why Priscilla was walking around such a dangerous area to the point of being captured by Enrique's henchmen. The young girl breaks the silence by timidly calling out to the director, who briefly responds, waiting for what she will say. Priscilla asks with tears in her eyes if he happens to be preparing to leave and abandon them for good. Ivan recalls receiving a visit from a government official and that he had been absent quite a bit from the orphanage lately. He realizes this must be the real reason she believes he was planning to leave at any moment. But the veteran reflects that maybe the problem is much simpler than his constant mysterious trips. He admits to himself that he might have let his true feelings of wanting to leave slip through to the kids. Suddenly, he is brought back to reality upon hearing a soft sob right beside him. Priscilla begins crying out loud and begs desperately for the director not to leave them alone in that place. The veteran understands that the girl, being a war orphan, was terrified of the thought of losing her only safe home again. He deduces she went to town to look for work in secret, but ended up mistaken for a spy due to walking so quietly. He affectionately places his coat over her shoulders while she asks through sobs where he will go now. Although Ivan's greatest wish is indeed to leave that alternate world behind, he makes a decision. The veteran takes a short pause, takes a deep breath, and starts speaking in a very comforting tone. He reveals he is only going to St. Yansk University and guarantees with a smile that he will always return to visit them. Priscilla smiles, relieved through her tears, knowing he does not need to and will not vanish from their lives immediately, since he dedicated so much to that orphanage. Ivan calculates he will need about 3 years to manage a permanent return. Priscilla knows the entrance exam for St. Yansk University is very hard and that the test takes place in November. With a mischievous smile, she realizes that if the kids pass the exam, they will be able to see him in just 1 year. Gathered in secret at the orphanage, the little ones plan a new secret mission using the exact same rules as before. Priscilla seriously explains that the mission consists of acting without anyone getting caught by the director. She states that the side that manages to pass the college exam wins, leaving all the orphans eager and determined to study. Thus, the kids kick off an intense study routine, while Ivan analyzes the report satisfied that everything is running smoothly. One of the reports shows the daughter of the legendary berserker Einar, indicating her mission was completed. Another file shows Lucia, the charismatic disciple of the vampire rogue Enrique, also marked as an absolute success. Ivan focuses his gaze on another document and starts recalling his combat past alongside the old hero's party. Meanwhile, a large steam train moves along the tracks, cutting through the vast landscape toward its next destination. The focus of Ivan's mission shifts to the gleaming sword belonging to one of the new targets of his constant watch. Inside the carriage, young Isabel observes the scenery through the window with a thoughtful expression while holding her sword. She is none other than the respected daughter of the world's greatest hero, carrying a massive legacy on her shoulders. Ivan recalls that, at its core, the legendary hero's party operated as a true elite assassination unit in the war. They needed to breach extremely dangerous and hostile territories to decapitate the leaders of the enemy army. To carry out an objective of such weight, it was absolutely vital that everyone act with maximum discretion and quiet. The hero Maximilian was known for solving the worst problems with proud smiles on his face right in the middle of battle. His own teammates used to yell out, terrified, claiming he was a complete raving lunatic due to his tactics. Enrique complained mockingly, asking if he did not want to go shouting through the forest that the grand hope of the Allied kingdom was right there. Suddenly, she feels something approaching in the darkness and turns around quickly with a suspicious look. The warrior Gilbert charges forward, swinging his sword in a powerful strike, roaring that he has zero intention of losing. The two create a massive clash of devastating blows. While their ally yells frantically at their madness, Gilbert laughs, saying it was just a good warm-up, but his partner screams terrified that his wrist is broken. He calmly asks Patricia to use her healing magic, but she feels a bit insulted by his absurd composure. Right beside them, the berserker Einar merely lets out a raspy, booming laugh at all that chaos. He shouts proudly about the men of Drone leaving their mark on Earth, while the others beg him not to do anything stupid. Suddenly, an immense glowing streak of energy cuts through the entire night sky above the mountains. The colossal impact of that absurd force reverberates throughout the entire forest, drawing attention from all around. With all that racket, massive hordes of enraged monsters surge from their nests like agitated wasps. Ivan recalls that they nearly perished just trying to escape the Demon King's army after that ridiculous flex of power. A beautiful, brilliant star twinkles in the middle of the clear, starry sky right above the treetops. An armored hand points proudly at the brilliant star shining in the middle of the blue expanse. With a silly grin, Maximilian used to boast proudly that he had split the sky, showing just how eccentric a man he was. Gilbert claimed he cut even deeper, while Einar roared with laughter, stating he could split a whole mountain in half. Einar tried using big words to sound smart, but his female teammate shut him down mercilessly. Saying it was useless, Ivan reflects that the hero's party was a true den of lunatics, and that the hero himself was the absolute worst of them all. Despite all the madness and constant perils, Maximilian was the one who always shone brightest among them. He laughed out loud and took absurd risks to draw enemy attention, splitting the night sky for no reason at all. Later, he confessed he only did it because he wanted to see the stars, making Ivan realize he never liked the hero. That man defeated the Demon King 4 years ago and suddenly vanished off the map, severing all contact with the world. Ivan thinks everyone only remembers the hero title, but is gradually forgetting the man named Maximilian. Inside the carriage, a government agent timidly asks if something is making Mr. Petrovich uncomfortable. With a cold and direct glare, Ivan immediately replies that the presence of all of them there bothers him immensely. He sighs deeply with tired eyes upon realizing that yet another extremely annoying situation has popped up in his way. Dmitri is thoroughly impressed to confirm that the train attack actually happened and asks how Ivan managed to predict it. He enthusiastically shakes the veteran's hands, admiring him for hitting the exact date, time, and location of the hit. Dmitri offers a military intelligence support team for upcoming assignments, unaware that he raised suspicion. He curiously asks how Ivan built a secret spy network without the government's knowledge during these 4 years of retirement. Ivan knows he simply predicted everything based on story tropes, but to Dmitri it looks like he commands a global spy network. He knows lying will cause problems, but prefers to remain silent because he understands a man's authority stems from mystery. However, the consequence of that mysterious decision ended up proving quite different from what he imagined. The veteran ended up receiving unwanted backup from 5 clumsy spies tasked with monitoring his every move. Irritated, Ivan wonders why secret spies would wear identical black suits in the middle of a regular passenger carriage. Ivan points out that the carriage is full of empty seats, yet they decided to squeeze together in a highly suspicious manner. He wonders how he will ever retire in peace, having to deal with spies as amateurish and clumsy as those rookies. With an intimidating look, Ivan begins delivering a long, exhausting lecture to them on how to actually act in the world of espionage. As the lecture continues, the train keeps moving along the tracks under the clear blue sky of that afternoon trip. The large, heavy iron wheels of the train spin rapidly along the rails, keeping the journey at a steady pace. As soon as they reach the station, the spies respectfully bid farewell to Ivan, fully determined to follow their new orders. The rookies flee terrified, remembering Dmitri had said Ivan was a quiet man, yet the veteran did not stop talking for a single second. They cry in terror, stating he is a true monster who spoke for 18 straight hours without taking a break. Watching the agents run away in panic, Ivan finally breathes a sigh of relief for managing to shake off his amateur escort. He knows Dmitri sent them to watch him, but he took the chance to give them a good scolding and an excuse to leave. Ivan had ordered the spy team to focus on protecting Oscar, the young son of the respected knight Gilbert. He feels satisfied with the move, having freed himself from surveillance while securing the safety of an important ally. The veteran spots Isabel walking along the platform with her travel bag and decides to follow her while keeping a safe distance. The young blonde quietly enters the passenger carriage, unaware that she is being closely watched from afar. Sitting comfortably in her seat, Isabel rests her face in her hand with a bored and thoughtful look. Her assistant tries to calm her down, telling her not to worry, since that man always acted the same way toward them. Annoyed by his words, the young blonde delivers a swift, sharp slap, knocking her assistant's hand away. With eyes flashing with rage, she tells the man to shut his mouth and calls him a useless fool for trying to defend him. The assistant stammers, trying to explain himself, but she cold orders him to get out of her sight because she does not even want to look at him. As the assistant steps away embarrassed, Isabel mutters under her breath, calling him an idiot under her stern glare. The man closes the compartment door angrily and decides to walk away into the carriage hallway to blow off steam. As soon as he is alone, his expression turns into a terrifying face filled with fury over the humiliation suffered. The express trip proceeds normally after departing the city of Saint Matilen toward the kingdom's grand capital. Since that train route passes very close to the former war front lines, that entire region is considered dangerous. Most surrounding areas are heavily guarded military zones, making attack opportunities scarce. Ivan analyzes the map of the 30 stations and calculates that there are only 3 specific points suitable for an ambush. The train passes through the first risk zone during sunset, but the trip continues in total silence without issues. The second dangerous point is also crossed during the night without any bandit group attempting to raid the carriages. Even so, the veteran keeps his hand steady near his concealed sidearm, ready for any sign of imminent threat. With his gaze shining intensely in the carriage dimness, he mentally prepares for the last and most dangerous stop. The train begins to rattle heavily along the tracks, drawing the attention of all passengers inside the compartment. A deathly, highly tense silence fills the whole carriage as the trip nears its end. Ivan grows intrigued by the absolute stillness and wonders if he made a mistake predicting a terrorist attack there. He knows school story tropes always start with an attack, so that sudden peace makes no sense. The veteran grits his teeth in anger, pondering the terrifying possibility that this story might not be about an ordinary academy. He recalls the desperation of war and wonders if that cursed alternate world even has a peaceful ending. At the final stop, people start running panicked, screaming that a bearded armed man is threatening everyone there. He thinks about what would happen if the original hero had not isolated himself, but rather returned to Earth after seeing the ending. The veteran locks his somber gaze into the void, questioning the cruel fate of that world abandoned by all. He recalls his former life as an ordinary youth on Earth and wonders what his true role in all of this actually is. The large train finally reaches its final destination. Coming to a silent stop at the dark, quiet station platform, Ivan rests his hand against the cold glass window and repeats to himself that he hates this place and wants to leave as soon as possible. His single greatest desire is to leave everything behind, lay in a warm bed in his comfortable home, and sleep in peace for a week. The veteran feels an enormous built-up rage against that cursed, dangerous medieval fantasy world where he was thrown. He feels a severe angst choking his throat and frantically repeats that he needs to find a way out of there. Suddenly, his battle instincts trigger to the absolute extreme due to a deafening noise up ahead. His mind's illusion shatters completely like broken glass before the real danger approaching. A devastating, blinding explosion tears through the quiet darkness, destroying a large portion of the station in an instant. The violent shockwave sweeps across the train platform, tossing debris and fire smoke in all directions. A gigantic trail of flames consumes the tracks and train carriages, launching the terrifying attack he had foreseen. The train carriage begins falling violently, dragging everything in its path through the dark. Isabel lets out a shriek of terror mid-fall, while Kim Sunwoo's frightened sigh disappears from Ivan's mind. Ivan takes full control and enters his cold combat mode, freezing his immediate thoughts and feelings. His mind becomes sharp and focused, recalling the harsh Krasilov winter and the long nights of war, calm and meticulous. The veteran realizes the tutorial has not ended and that his instinct was completely spot on. Ivan leaps nimbly under the light of the full moon, watching the destroyed carriages collide below. With an unyielding look and clenched teeth, he knows the outcome of that fierce battle is still yet to play out. The train debris lands at the bottom of the valley, surrounded by dark mountains, raising a thick cloud of smoke and dust. Slowly, the dust begins to settle, revealing the landscape devastated by the violent impact of the derailment. Isabel wakes up quite dazed and bruised amidst the destruction, letting out a weak groan of pain. She opens her eyes with difficulty and tries to grasp what actually happened after the terrible train crash. Diane August, who is severely injured, asks relieved and out of breath if his lady is finally regaining consciousness. Looking to the side, the young blonde freezes completely in shock at the critical state of her assistant. Diane is buried beneath the heavy train wreckage and bleeding heavily, driving Isabel into desperation at the sight. In that moment of despair, she remorsefully remembers the harsh, rude way she treated him just minutes prior. She recalls the look of rage and resentment on the assistant's face after being humiliated in front of everyone in the carriage, even badly hurt. Diane begs her to flee immediately and abandon him before enemies arrive. Isabel cries and asks why he saved her when he hates her, calling him a complete fool for sacrificing himself. Diane says his father cares for no one and that she should not risk her life for a silly reason like that. Staring closely at the assistant, the young heiress firmly states that she already knows all about that sad reality, crying. Diane confesses he never wanted to draw his father's attention, and that he did it only because she is Maximilian's daughter. He says she represents the most precious legacy left behind by the original hero before he vanished from that world. The young man states with all his strength that she is the great hope for the future of everyone left behind. Isabel tries to counter his argument, but is interrupted by the quiet approach of Ivan pointing his firearm. The veteran coldly praises the immense loyalty shown by the assistant amidst all that tragedy. Diane spits blood and lets out a groan of pure agony. Trying to face the mysterious man in the trench coat, Ivan asks the young knight's name, and he responds with great effort that he is called Dean August. Dean asks who he is, and the veteran grandly introduces himself using his codename Ivan Petrovich. Ivan asks if he truly wishes to remain alive, and Dean answers breathlessly that he does, if that is possible. The veteran swiftly pops off the cap of his dreadful healing potion vial with his thumb, readying the application. Holding the glowing liquid, Ivan cold warns the young knight that the healing process is going to hurt quite a bit. Diane endures the extreme pain of the healing potion through pure willpower, and that is precisely how Isabel prefers to remember it. Diane roars in pain, begging for the end, and swears to reveal everything he knows about the Order of Knights. If he stops, that he passes out right after completely healed, leaving Isabel quite confused and surprised by that extreme reaction. Furious, Isabel lands a hard punch on Ivan's face, making the veteran wonder if the girl lost her mind. He takes the blow glancing off his cheek, not understanding why she decided to attack him in such a foolish manner. Diane wakes up calling for his mother in regression, and Ivan blames Isabel for disrupting the healing with her punch. Sensing enemies approaching over the mountains, Ivan tells her to carry Deanne while he handles the combat. Wielding her sword with resolve, Isabel insists she is also capable of fighting and refuses to sit out. However, the young heiress cannot hide the massive nervous tremor in her hands as she holds the weapon. Ivan says her skill is not bad, but unnecessary, making Isabel irritated at his casual way of speaking. Ivan notices her personality takes after her mother, and she asks suspiciously if he happened to know her father. Without answering, Ivan orders them to gather the survivors and light a fire to endure the harsh cold of the night. He says not to worry, but Isabel questions if he really plans to face unknown enemies all by himself. Without hesitating or looking back, the seasoned warrior walks confidently toward the darkness of the forest. He repeats in a calm, firm tone that this is also not a concern she should stress herself over. Ivan recalls the old military doctrines that commanded assuming the worst-case scenario and acting in the best way possible. He knows the advice sounds overly obvious, but during real combat, everyone grasps its true meaning. The veteran knows full well that enemies will always try to attack using the strategy hardest to counter. He deduces that after the train crash, the enemies will surely expect the survivors to try to flee the area. From the perspective of those fleeing, the worst is falling into an ambush, so the solution is placing the target right where the enemy can easily spot it. With that, the enemy pulls back the soldiers scattered for tracking, since they now need to shift search tactics to a full encirclement. They reorganize to surround the target, and that is precisely when the veteran acts to achieve the best result. Thinking of the worst scenario and acting in the best way possible carries a very simple meaning behind those command words. If the enemy is the worst adversary possible for him, then he also needs to turn into the absolute worst nightmare for that same enemy. Summarizing this whole strategy, the attack he would least want to face in direct combat, he delivers right back to the adversary using the extermination unit's long-range handgun precision shooting technique. Suddenly, one of the enemy soldiers goes into complete panic upon seeing his comrade struck down without anyone expecting it. The men begin shouting frantically because one of them got shot, demanding the mysterious shooter show himself at once. In the heat of the moment, the enemies attempt to reorganize quickly to surround the shooter in the dark forest. But in a forest as dark as that one, carrying a lit torch turns into a massive blunder. The fire serves as a perfect target in the dark, and one of the men screams horrified upon seeing an axe flying straight toward him. Panicked and terrified, another soldier starts firing wildly in all directions, screaming for the enemy to meet his end. However, Ivan's swift and brutal attacks continue slicing through enemies amidst the darkness. The veteran moves like a true shadow, taking down opponents one by one before they can even react. After eliminating the immediate threat, he calmly holsters his hand hatchet at his waist. Ivan lets out a long sigh as he observes the trail of fallen bodies around him on the forest floor. A surprise strike planned by a former extermination unit member is something devastating and relentless. This tactic allows a single experienced combatant to surround and corner an entire group alone. One of the soldiers reports to the captain that another squad was defeated by axes, even after sending reinforcements where gunshots were heard. Centurion Ipolos grows thoughtful upon realizing his search team is easily being eliminated, suspecting an elite group. He hears gunshot sounds coming from completely opposite directions, first from the west and shortly after from the north. Realizing the shots are slowly nearing his position, he begins suspecting the enemy knows their location. Wasting no time, the captain reaches out his hand and cold orders the soldier to hand over his firearm. He points the pistol skyward and fires a shot, leaving the soldier beside him completely confused and frightened. The centurion bites his lips in anger, deducing that the enemy in the forest is actually just a single man. The soldier says that would be impossible due to the numerous gunshots, but the captain asks if he still has not figured out the situation. In truth, multiple wire traps were meticulously set up between the trees in the dark forest. When enemy soldiers trip over those hidden wires, they trigger mechanisms attached to weapons tied to trees, firing on their own. The captain screams furious that absolutely every gunshot heard in the forest came from their own weapons that fell into the traps. The subordinate stands in total shock upon realizing the macabre brilliance behind the enemy's tactic. The entire offensive was calculated down to the millimeter to destabilize the troops and send them into absolute despair. Ipolos understands the gunshots were mere bait and that they fell for it like fools by sending the search party straight into the trap. The soldier wonders if the hero's daughter could be capable of doing all that alone, making the captain reflect on that possibility. The centurion recalls the absurd strength of the legendary hero and knows that if the daughter possesses half that power, she is definitely a monster. He orders all troops to gather immediately to hunt down the mysterious intruder hidden in the middle of the forest. Ipolos warns he will move alone from there on out, leaving his subordinate quite surprised and worried. One more gunshot echoes in the distance, cutting through the night silence while a bird flies off startled into the dark sky. Meanwhile, at the makeshift camp, survivors tremble in fear around the fire, believing everyone is going to perish. Isabel tries to calm Deanne, but the young knight keeps delusional, acting like a scared child laughing at imaginary lights. Suddenly, the young girl's eyes widen as she hears a suspicious noise coming straight from the darkness right behind them. The survivors panic instantly as the centurion emerges from the forest shadows, glaring at the group around the fire. He grandly introduces himself as the former centurion of the Imperial Guard Infantry, glaring at everyone coldly with his sword. The captain asks Isabel directly if she is the hero's daughter, stating he will make a point to personally handle her. The full moon shines brightly in the night sky, illuminating the forest where the mortal showdown is about to occur. Ivan mentally calculates that, excluding the captain who can predict the fire line, the total enemy soldiers sent equals 50 men. The veteran tightens his grip on the handle of his hand hatchet, which is already thoroughly stained with the blood of enemies he dispatched. With a cold and focused gaze, he concludes the first phase of his plan to clear the area was practically completed. He calmly sheathes his weapon, knowing he fulfilled his role in drastically reducing the number of pursuers. Despite the success, his thoughts grow increasingly confused about the turn of events in that complicated situation. Ivan thinks that if this world were a school story, this beginning would just be the tutorial, but its difficulty is absurdly high. Esidisi's tutorial was so simple, he could have won with one hand tied behind his back since the train kidnappers were quite weak. However, Isabel's case is far worse, as escaping a train buried by a landslide would already be a huge challenge on its own. To make matters worse, right after comes an entire group of extremely dangerous elite enemies, giving no chance to learn combat. On top of all that, Boss Ipolos is a formidable warrior capable of using the fireline perception skill flawlessly. Although some games feature scripted losses against early bosses, these guys are genuinely trying to end Isabel. Everything would be impossible to beat unless a support character showed up to assist, which makes Ivan realize something major. He suddenly realizes that the role of that support character who stepped in to save the day actually belongs to him. But if he is merely an ordinary secondary character who will not even show up in the story's final credits, that means there will be no happy ending stored for him and that he might never manage to return to his real world. He sees two main problems: why the tutorial is so hard, and whether Isabel would truly perish without his help. With so many doubts in mind, the veteran knows there is only one way to find out what will happen. Ivan positions himself atop a cliff in the forest to observe the camp where the survivors are gathered. Down below, Ipolos tells Isabel he prepared thoroughly since she is the hero's daughter, but feels disappointed by what he sees. The centurion sneers and coldly states to the young blonde that she is extremely weak. Ivan decides that even if Isabel risks meeting her end there, he will not step into combat whatsoever. The veteran keeps watching from above, firm in his decision not to butt into the fight so he can see what she is capable of. Isabel charges with a battle cry and strikes with all her strength, but the centurion blocks the strike effortlessly. Ipolos mocks her, saying diligent students memorize manuals thinking that will make strikes faster, but that they are wrong. Irritated by his taunts, the young girl tells the enemy to shut his mouth while trying to force her sword against his. Watching the fight from afar, the survivors panic upon realizing the hero's heiress is being pushed back. The captain states that swinging a sword is useless if it does not hit the opponent, since the goal is simply to pierce the target's flesh. He laments that the hero's daughter reached this age without ever facing a real battle in her life. Furious at the opponent's disdain, Isabel yells at him to shut up and releases a powerful glowing energy from her weapon. However, the centurion's counterattack is devastating, sparking a massive burst of sparks in the dark night. With the force of the captain's blow, Isabel's sword is sent flying far away and lands stuck in the distant ground. Ipolos laments losing valuable soldiers for nothing, thinking the fight would be resolved so quickly and easily. Pointing his blade at her neck, the centurion asks if the hero's daughter has any last words before meeting her end. Isabel lowers her head defeated and begins recalling everything she learned about the true essence of a hero. She remembers the advice not to fight to become a legend, but rather to protect those who need help. From afar, survivors scream frantically for Diane, while Isabel recalls that the hero was a hero for being the bravest. She remembers the oath taken by Diane over 10 years ago, stating they should not attempt to be grand legends. The knight had sworn before going off to war that they needed to be fully aware of their own weaknesses. Even now, having lost consciousness and sense in the present, those profound words still echo in Diane's heart. The words of the ancient oath of Thales urged putting oneself in the shoes of the weak and seeing the world through their eyes. Isabel finally accepts her current state and whispers to herself that she needs to admit she truly is weak. Ipolos strikes to finish her off for good, but the young girl manages to dodge by rolling to the side at the last second with agility. She understands the true reason for drawing a sword is simply doing what is right and protecting others. Doing what is right should be second nature, just like helping those in need every day. While the survivors cry in fear, the centurion charges fiercely with his massive sword, ready to finish off the opponent once and for all. But Isabel recovers her weapon and grips it with renewed resolve and impressive firmness in her hands. She clashes against the captain, knowing her strength comes not from false courage, but from her complete humility. Doing what is right is the simplest duty of all, and she stands firmly to defend the survivors behind her. Her eyes begin glowing intensely, with an overwhelming magical power as she raises her sword for battle. The two exchange extremely fast, violent strikes, illuminating the dark clearing with flying sparks in every direction. Isabel can now track his movements with precision, blocking and countering every single charge from the centurion. The captain stands completely shocked, unable to grasp how she suddenly became so strong and fast in the fight. With a glowing, focused gaze, Isabel charges at full speed, concentrating her power into the final strike. The young girl delivers an overwhelming, precise sword strike that slices through the air at incredible speed. Under the bright light of the full moon, she lands a clean hit on the centurion's chest, causing his blood to splatter. Ipolos begins coughing blood uncontrollably and lets out a weak, morbid chuckle as he feels life fading away. The centurion remarks with irony that he never imagined being mortally wounded first by the legendary hero and then by his daughter. The enemy captain drops to his knees on the forest floor, completely defeated and bleeding heavily from the fatal slash. Isabel stares at him sternly and responds coldly that she is not just the hero's daughter, as everyone usually says. She proudly declares her name is Isabel, daughter of Maximilian and Marie. Showing her own identity to the opponent, Ipolos accepts the response with a faint smile on his face and ends up collapsing lifeless onto the damp, dark forest floor. Isabel lets out a long sigh of relief and admits to herself that she is completely exhausted and out of energy after that fight. However, she cannot hold back a smile of satisfaction upon realizing she managed to overcome such a tough trial, thanks to the young warrior's efforts.
Absolutely all crash survivors managed to save themselves from the enemies. Suddenly, Isabel hears Ivan's voice praising her flawless performance in the fight and gets a massive scare at his approach. Ivan strolls up casually with hands in pockets, making Isabel ask worriedly about the other enemy soldiers. The veteran nudges Ipelos's lifeless body with his foot and coldly notifies her that the captain was the last remaining adversary, relieved that everything ended well.
Isabel collapses onto her back on the ground, laughing and praising the success of that perilous mission. Ivan reflects that the brutal attack seemed like the typical power awakening event that usually happens in a game tutorial. He knows that if things had taken the standard route, all survivors would have been tragically eliminated by the enemies. That would make Isabel awaken her rage right after to wipe out everyone in the forest, being the sole reason for everyone to survive. But the fact that everyone is alive is due entirely to the veterans' direct intervention, something impossible for a common extra. Seeing the survivors happy and safe, Ivan smirks, relieved, feeling certain that he is not just a background character. In that moment of peace, he ends up recalling a striking old memory from when the hero split the skies with his sword. On that historic day, what the legendary hero truly wanted to see upon cutting open the night sky was not just the shine of a simple star. He wanted to confirm that the morning star would keep shining steady in its place, even beneath the dark clouds of demon territory. The veteran confesses to himself that he never truly liked the hero, but has to admit there was one single exception to that. Even after so much time and amidst all the present struggles, that comforting memory remains alive. The morning star continues shining right where it should be, and Ivan merely watches it with a deep feeling of admiration. Now, with a calm mind, he refocuses on his main goal of ensuring the safe graduation of the former hero party's kids. To fulfill this mission, he knows he needs to find out how the demons managed to act with such boldness near the capital itself. He wonders who the leader behind them is and how many managed to infiltrate the academy, while pulling a green potion from his pocket. Seeing the somber expression on Ivan's face with that glowing potion in hand, Isabel's eyes widen as she asks what he is about to do. With a terrifying smile and uncapping the bottle, Ivan warns that the extermination unit has a lot of curiosity and that now it is time for an interrogation.